Hey, everybody. Welcome. Hunt Club Podcast, Cyber Minds Edition. I'm Woj, Mark Wojtasiak, VP of Research and Strategy here on the product team at Vectra. I'm excited about this episode. Eduardo and I go way back. He's a legend in cybersecurity, according to Vectra.
There were
And I
quite
don't
a
know. I
few
think this is
legends. There were quite a few.
we have quite a few legends, and before we kind of jump in, this topic today. Well, before we even tee up the topic, Eduardo, I wanted you to introduce yourself to the people tuning in to the Hunt Club podcast.
Yeah, so Eduardo Ortiz, I'm the VP Global Head of Cybersecurity for Techtronic Industries Group, which is TTI Group, which in reality, what we do, it's battery operated power tools for both the consumer side and the professional side of the power tool industry. So we do have a division of vacuum cleaners too, but $15 billion in revenue company, around 50,000 employees, trade in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And I've been doing cyber for 25 plus years. I don't want to date myself,
Yeah,
but
yeah. You've seen it all. You've heard it all. Uh, I'm sure you've heard your share of pitches, but I didn't want to have you. I wanted to have you on, kind of talk a little bit more, not necessarily about technology and products and all that kind of stuff, but you deal quite a bit with C-suite and board, right? And the conversations you're having and kind of what you've experienced and learned over the years. I think when we first started talking, it was about, hey, how do you begin to translate cybersecurity value and what you guys do? And in your experience, translate that into business value or into like conversations that matter and make sense for the C-suite and the board. So I kind of wanted to frame it that way, and I'll tee up some questions for you, and we'll see kind of where this conversation goes. Because I've got my opinions, you've got your opinions, because yours are probably a bit more applicable, given you're in the seat.
yeah.
I'm more of a voice box for people like yourself and the conversations I have with people with your peers, and I want to see how this gels. Sound good?
Yep. Let's go for it.
Let's do it. Okay, so if we frame this up in terms of the conversations you're having with the C-suite and the board, the first thing I want to talk to you about is transparency, right? How do you talk to C-suite and board? Is there a rule of thumb that you follow relative to transparency? Are you constantly in selling mode, or like what's your mindset going into those conversations?
So, so I think transparency is not just an important part of the role, but it's actually I believe it's at this level and at times that we're living, it's probably the single most crucial element for the lead, cybersecurity leads, and we'll call it CISO global heads. I mean, I'm global head of cyber, but I'm the one that reports to the board. I manage, like all the different six business units that we have, kind of like report to me. So it's probably transparency is the most crucial element for us to have an effective security program, right? Um, I think it's what starts to drive that constant conversation that we have from a cybersecurity. It's an isolated IT cost center into more of a core business enabler, right? And how do you do that, right? Like I think I think you have to come to with not only with your executive, with more importantly with the board, that we're not here to prevent all bad things from happening, right? That's impossible. But at one point, I mean, like I said, I've been 20 some years. That was our mentality, and I still meet some people that's their mentality, and that's not being transparent, right? Like it's about the likelihood, the impact, and what is
Yeah.
the necessary investment, and how do we ensure that when the bad things does happen, which well they will happen, we're resilient enough, we're prepared, and we're ready to lead with the right amount of transparency and credibility, right? Um, I will say that first, right? From trust and credibility, build trust, right? And foster that accountability by not only encouraging your executive and your board, but even your employees to be the front line of how do we ensure that we're you know protecting the industry, well, our company from the bad actors that are trying to attack us, right? Business alignment, that make sure that you have the right business alignment with it as part of your transparency. um, how do we translate complex technical threats into simple quantifiable business impacts? And I have seen a lot of crazy formulas out there. I try to keep it simple, and I
Yeah.
have really simple charts that keep it very straightforward, and that has helped us, right? Both to secure budget and resources, right? And kind of like I want those stakeholders to be for to understand that our program, it will provide a return on investment for risk reduction. The third one is crisis management. You have to be really transparent about that. Synchronize your responses. Ensure that this is not only IT and security team, it's legal, communications, the executive team, HR. How do we if something happened, how are we going to be able to handle this, and the cultural impact that this comes in, right? Like this brings in, like, for me, it's breaking down the silos and explain the why behind the security policies and why in the context
Yeah.
of how it affects the business in order to drive that resiliency. So I think if you take those four aspects of it, it ensures that we're seen as a strategic enabler that manage core business risks and not just a technical cost. It's easier said than done. It takes a lot of practice,
Oh yeah.
and I've been burned many times. But I keep. I mean, it's a work in progress.
You brought up a couple things, and I'm going I'm gonna riff here a little bit because this is fresh off of I was at Gartner last week in London at their security risk management conference, and I'm like you. I like to try and keep things simple. We got enough complexity in this industry, you know that more than I do,
Yeah.
but even on my side of the fence, it's like, how do we keep it simple? And the way I was trying to frame it, and you had alluded to this because it was, I have the notion. I want to see if this resonates with you. I have this, you know, um, simplistic way of looking at resilience. You use the word resilience, and I think there's two sides to that coin. There's resilience to attacks pre-compromise, right? That would be okay. Stop attackers from getting in, right? Your typical, you know, prevention kind of methodology and mindset and approach. But then equally as important, I would argue, is there's an element of resilience post compromise. What happens when they're already in, right? And how quickly can you, detect, investigate, and stop those attacks in progress? Do you follow a similar conversation pattern? Like when you say about simplifying things, what are you, what types of questions are you getting, or how are you framing it to C-suite and board?
From a so you're talking from a in the event that something already happened, or
Both. I think they're equally as important. Like, can this happen to us? Can we prevent it? Pre-compromise,
Mhm.
right? Or what's the likelihood and impact of it? What's the likely and impact of it happening to us? And then what's the likelihood and impact of it is already exists or it's already happening to us?
so 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 I think I divided it into a few areas, and that's where my clarifying question came in. But we can
Yeah.
target all those probably. I will say from a strategy perspective, for me, it's super important to maintain that consistent communication, right? Um, have a kind of like a cadence, and there's no surprises in that cadence, right? Um, for example, for it's easy for the board meetings because we provide updates in every board meeting, and I always conclude with a look ahead on emerging risk and things that might be happening, right? Um, because you want to be able, you want to make sure that you're proactive and prepared and mitigate that fear that a problem is being concealed until it becomes a crisis, right? So
Yeah.
that consistent communication, I call it, it's kind of like no surprises. This is what we're looking at. There might be one or two surprises, but I always go, I mean, don't let perfection get in the way of good enough, right? Um,
Yeah.
Quantifiable risk, it's something that we started using in our program. Some of them might be very simple. Like I said before, I try to report on the dollar value of risk reduction using different frameworks, right? Or actually kind of like a modified framework, like a modified version to our specific business, versus the technical. We patched this many things. We did
Yeah.
this. If they want to know that, they can ask me that. But in our case, it's more about those financial metrics, right? And do a translation. Every board is different. Every executive, every company is different, right? So what might work in a previous company might not work on your current company. We do try to show program maturity, and we've been doing that for the last 4 years against, in our case, the NIST CFF framework, right? This is how we are from a CMMI assessment. These are our scores, and this is how we're trending. Why do we do that? We want to show consistent discipline, that we're being strategically when we do the executions of our security strategy, which change probably every 12 to 18 months. Before you do a 5 year plan, now we're doing a 12 to 18-month plan just to adjust to the industry, right? And what's happening out there. But it also shows them that we're continuously improving and
Yeah.
according to risk. Alignment, I think business alignment, not only in your question probably was pre and post, you know, I have to make sure that the executives teams are engaged with not only the board view but our view, and how are we really able to integrate security in what the business is doing, right? Um, that really, in our company is changing more about, of how do we make sure that we're using security to become a competitive advantage and enable the business to go faster and be more disruptive, right? And from an executive perspective, we are in the process of doing this. It's been a little bit of a hassle, but I will say I'm hearing this more and more now. Tabletop exercises, not for our teams, but for the
Yeah.
executive side. I think that really puts the mind frame of them. Okay, this team knows what they're doing, and they're preparing for before and after if something happens, and it validates the effectiveness of what is our response plan. How do we build that board confidence in what in what they're going to have to be responding, and across the organization to lead during any type of incident. So I think those are my summary of actions. In a way, I combine everything. I just broke it down in different aspects, but
Yeah.
it's a
No.
combination of having one conversation can touch those 4 or 5 different angles.
Yeah, I heard consistency of approach
That's a
when
number
talking to
one.
the suicide board. It's like from one meeting to the next. I don't know what your cadence is, but like they know what to expect. Like you set the bar. Here's what we're going to talk about. This is how I'm going to frame what you know the conversations that I'm going to have with the board, and then you stick with that meeting after meeting after meeting, so that there's some consistency and predictability and repeatability there in that, and not only in what you're presenting and messaging, but how you're measuring that, and then everybody's on the same page, right? Am I hearing you right on that?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I remember one previous boss, which was, I've been lucky in my life that I have really good people that I work with, and work for. And I remember he told me, hey, there's the 3 L's of reporting, right? You have to level, you have to language, and you have to look ahead, right? So level, you frame all the metrics in terms of business risk, not vulnerability counts, right? Like what I said about the patching 5,000 servers
Yeah.
versus we reduce the financial exposure from this to this, right? Or by critical vulnerabilities, 35% or 40% this quarter or this year. The language, right? Eliminate that technical jargon. Like our internal motto and kind of like our mission, it's protect the profits, right? Doesn't say anything
Yeah.
about technology, encryption, or anything. They love it because everyone in every business unit can, oh, you guys are here to protect the profits of the company. That's what we do,
Yeah.
right? And the look ahead, those three L's: level, language, look ahead. Kind of like, hey, what are the emerging threats that are coming? So it kind of like you frame it, you eliminate the technical, and then you do some, looking forward statements about this is what's happening in the industry. This is how we're getting prepared. Um,
Yeah.
and if something deviates, I'll let you know, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
you're right. I just remember the three L's after you were doing the second question.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like I think in threes too, and it's like as humans, that's what we can process
Yeah,
typically, and that can I love that consistency in terms of like starting with the why, right? Your why is protect the profits,
yeah.
right? Everybody's like, yep, we're all aligned on the why.
And I
Then I
have to
think
say,
of
I got
like,
that from Steve Saluski. He used to be the CISO for Levi's, and I read a document that he put out, a part of another podcast, the CISO series, and I was like, wow, okay, that makes sense, right? So, kudos to him because
yeah,
it actually resonates with the business.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think of like your what, protect our profits, protect our profits from what, right? And that's your I think that's your language. Is that your second one? Language.
Hmm.
Whether it's existing threats and risks to the organization or to profits, emerging ones, etc. And then your third was level, right? And that's where the metrics come in. And I think that's more of like a how question, right? How are we doing,
Yep.
right? In delivering that. That's where you might get into technology, if I'm right or wrong here, in terms of like, hey, our goal is to protect the profits, right? We're all aligned on that. Okay, from what? Existing threats, risks, threat vectors, emerging attackers, etc.
Yeah.
Okay, how are we doing? Well, not so great. Transparency comes into the mix. Not so great. We might need this technology, or we need this technology, or we're gapped here. And this is what, and that turns into like a potential business case for increased investment or shifting dollars from one priority to the other. Am I reading you right on the three L's?
Yeah, yeah. And one very important thing about this, and I think I alluded to that at the beginning, we're here to communicate risk, right? We're not here to own that risk or make that decision alone,
Yeah.
which has been, the in the last 20 years, I think in the last 5 to 8 years, that has been changing, right? Like our positions have become more of a, hey, I'm going to communicate what the risk is in this way. I'm not making this, like, is the business ready? If you want to accept that risk, then okay, we'll accept that risk because the investment is not there. We can, but it's a communication. It's how you level that
Yeah.
conversation with them in order to make sure that you're not on the hook for whatever happens. So
Yeah. Yeah. And do you often see risk defined differently by business unit? Like, how do you navigate that? Like, what, like, do you have to do it by business unit? Protect the profits, risk to operations, risk to, legal risk, right? Operational risk is like, are you going that granular, or are you just talking at a high level?
so we're actually going through that process even from redoing our security strategy, right? We're actually going through a lot of internal changes which are really good for the company, but we're deciding, okay, there's a central core, um you know level that it's non-negotiable, right? But for example, in the EU for our EMEA business unit, I have a lot more governance that have to be in place because of compliance with different regulations. But it's starting to happen in Asia Pacific too. So there's another layer where we say, okay,
Yeah.
this is the main core how we measure risk across the board, but we have to allow for that independency per business unit because I have business units that only do distribution and warehouse. They don't do any type of manufacturing or assembly or anything like that, right? Their risk is totally different from the other business units that have more on their plate. So we have to allow some independency to take place in order to define risk, because a risk that we might see as a high in one business unit might be a medium or a low for the other business unit based on their business model. So if the business is fine, let's go for it. But we have to be a little bit lenient on that one.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's how you translate that, like, you know, how you begin to translate value
Mm-hmm.
of certain security initiatives relative to those business units, and then your kind of baseline definition of risk across the organization. Makes a ton of sense.
Yep.
Awesome. I want to, because we both think in threes, I want to, I always like closing up these conversations, wrapping them in a bow around three things, right? So, three pieces of advice you have for your peers or anyone tuning in, right, for this podcast around communicating value of cybersecurity to the organization. Three things,
This is
or three
for
methods, or three ways.
okay. So I will say, I think we highlighted this here today, but the number one for me in the last 6 or 7 years has been to master the language of business risk, and I'm still working on that. Right. I'll say number one piece of advice is people, even I'm actually telling the analysts and engineers, hey, start mastering that language of business risk. When I started in this industry, I didn't get exposed to that language at all. Things have
Yeah.
changed, right? Quantify risk, translate those technical issues into financial, regulatory, and reputational impact, as based on different quantification. There's so many resources nowadays that I would say that's number one. Number two, champion that human-centric security from a cultural perspective. It's building a culture of safety. And what I say, I not even use security. I use safety because in our business, safety, when I go to and visit manufacturing plants and all that, it's all safety, 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 right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I go to a different company, it might be a different use of words, but champion that human-centric security with a culture of safety. Replace that blame with empowerment and education when your employees make mistakes. I think that's key to change finally change that view of cybersecurity being kind of like the Department of No, right? Or
Yeah.
they're trying to trick us all the time. And the third one will be embrace adaptability and learning, right? Lead beyond technology. And by that, I kind of like connected to the first one. So I'm living these three at the moment, and I'm trying to get better at that, right? What I mean by that, embrace adaptability and the learning, it's a be fluent in business fundamentals, finance, operations, and quickly adopt new resilient frameworks, that might come up in the industry. I mean, we have become a chief trust officer in a way because we're becoming a strategic partner for the business. And if we're getting better if we're improving in how we anticipate the business changes and the integrating security ahead of the needs of the business, we're going to be super successful. It's not easy. I think
Yeah.
it takes a lot. But I think those will be the three ones that I will say really gonna, if you're gonna be leading the organization, those are three key components that will be good advice for future leaders and current leaders at the time.
I think that's fantastic. I think on your third one, embrace adaptability and learning, is also where your transparency element comes
Yeah.
in, coming back full circle about being transparent about, sometimes I don't know is a good answer, a good enough answer where you have to like, it's like we need to dig into that and need to know, right? I think that's fantastic because I think that is applicable advice for any security vendor out there trying to have a conversation with you, us included, right? Number one, get into the language of business risk. So when we're talking to people like yourself, do we understand your business risk? and how you're framing risk,
Yep.
right? Number two, champion of human centric security or a culture of safety. As a vendor, I think of hey, behind every security technology or operations center or business leader or employee is a human being at the end of the day, right? How are we helping that human being be the best that they can possibly be, right, in their job? And then three, embrace adaptability and learning and transparency. I think as a vendor community, that obviously transparency is key. Sometimes you got to just say, hey, we can't help you there, right? Or I
Exactly.
know somebody who can,
Yeah.
right?
Listen, I have conversations with vendors that if I ask a question and the vendor say, I don't know, let me get back to you, I'm immediately trusting that person more of the because I got some crazy answers where it's like, well, that doesn't even make sense. But then I go back, research, and it's like, okay, this guy was trying to fool me with this crazy convoluted answer to this simple question, right? And of course, I don't know their product or their technology and all that, but then I start making sense. Okay, I prefer that somebody is transparent. I have vendors. I mean, and this is a true story where we were asking questions. And it was like, listen, we don't, we're not going to be able to help you here. But this company, which is one of our
Yeah,
competitors, they're a little bit ahead of what they're more aligned with what you're looking for. And you know what? We're still really good friends with that guy. I actually used them for another, security industry. People move around, but I trusted that guy because he was super
yeah,
honest about it and he heard our needs. On the other
yeah,
hand, I have some other vendors that I say, listen, I don't have time now. I'll get back to you when this is actually on my list, and they get offended or this, and like be transparent. I'm trying to
yeah,
be black and white. Let's be black and white, and it's going to be a long term relationship.
yeah,
So
100%. That's why I love talking to you, Eduardo. You keep it real.
we try, Watch. We try. I
Yeah,
mean, it's a lot of pressure. So I think the more real we keep it, the better we are from not only here in the office but with our families, right? And I think
yeah.
it helps.
Amen to that. Authentic, real, honest conversations. That's all. This industry's just got too much.
Yeah,
Well, I won't say what going on.
yeah, yeah.
It's just like I have normal conversations like this. So, hey, this was awesome. I always learn talking to you, listening to you. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
I know you're super busy, so this means a ton to us. So, thank you, thank you, thank you. But I'm not going to be shy about teeing up other conversations with you whenever you're
Oh,
available or
let me
flexible.
know. I enjoy doing this, and it's a way of giving back to our community, right?
Yeah,
If
100%.
I think there were quite a few takeaways today, but if I always say if somebody can take one thing out of any conversation that we have, I mean we're making the industry better, right? Which is
Yeah,
why we're still here.
yep.
So I appreciate
Transparency. Yeah,
appreciate you having me over, Vectra, of course, and I'm always available for another topic, another conversation at another time.
sounds great. Thanks, Eduardo. Eduardo made a great point there. Hey, comment, if you heard anything on this podcast and you want Eduardo to dig in a little deeper on stuff, hey, throw it in the comments. Like I'll throw it out there to him and we'll see if we can
Yep,
kind of bring him back on the show and go deeper into one area. Or happy to make connections across the industry. So
perfect.
anyway, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Nice seeing you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Till the next time.
Bye.